Waiting for the phantom power to turn on. Waiting for the phantom power to turn on. The phantom power takes a while to power the microphone. Here we are. Hi, hello. This is FSP Live. I'm the Amelia one. My pronouns she, they. And Robyn is our mod in the chat. We're here to talk about Murderbot and unmasking autism and also changing therapists because in the last episode of the Feminist Survival Project, I wasn't on it. Instead, Emily was talking to Dr. Donna Ariowo, who is hilarious and awesome and kind of more fun than me even on the thing for listening to Emily have a conversation. Um, and definitely has expertise in different stuff. So totally glad and grateful that she was able to do the episode. That's awesome. There's one thing that Emily and Dr. Oreo discussed in brief, which was like finding a therapist who is useful for a specific kind of work. And I want to talk a little bit, very little bit, about changing therapists and how to do that because a lot of people don't know much about changing therapists. Hold on. I'm wearing a sleeveless shirt today, which means you get to see my very fun tattoo. This is the funnest and most awesome and decorative tattoo that I have. I have several tattoos and I love them all, but this one just makes me so happy. Here's the other one that you can see. Hold on, I can do it. There we go. Okay. All right, so Dr. Donna Ariowo is a practicing therapist, and Emily has training as a therapist. That's what her master's degree was in. Uh, uh, so, and they both, of course, have had therapy and been in therapy, and so have I. I've had a half a dozen therapists, and at the very beginning, I didn't understand what therapy was exactly for, and I didn't know what to do. And also, undiagnosed autism meant that I wasn't clear on the rules, and there are some therapists who don't make the rules explicit or they don't ask specific questions. So I felt like I wasn't allowed to just to say things, or I thought this therapist is writing something down. I need to stop talking while they write stuff down. And one therapist just kept writing, and I was waiting for them to like look up at me or ask me a question. Or like maybe they answered me a question and I gave a short answer and they started writing notes and I like was waiting for the notes to be done. And we sat there in silence for 10 or 15 minutes. It was a very long time because I didn't know what to do. And maybe that therapist thought that they were like challenging me. I just didn't know what I was doing in therapy, and I needed someone who was going to be like, and here's how we therapy. So I went to that therapist once and then never went back. Um, that was not my first therapist. That was my first therapist out of college, I think. And then when I was in my master's program at Westminster Choir College, the therapist who was on staff at the conservatory was herself a graduate of the conservatory who went on to like be a professional singer, but like noticed how crazy singers are and got a degree in counseling and became a therapist for singers, like specializing in the neuroses of singers. And she was great. She was fantastic. Um, some of the best therapy I've had because it was the most like somebody who truly could relate to what was happening to me in conservatory training. And as a musician, like, and there's so much of identity. Like, there's a lot of research that shows that studying music, especially conservatory style training, changes your brain in measurable, noticeable ways, um, uh, more than like any other kind of intensive training, except for like becoming, like learning the knowledge as a London cab driver. That also reshapes your brain because it's this intensive learning, such that like when you take an fMRI, someone who's trained to look at them can be like, oh yeah, that's a musician, or that's a London cab driver. Anyway, so this one therapist was a really great, but like then I graduated and I went out into the world and didn't have health insurance and went into the worst depressive episode of my life, um, and ended up in like a Medicaid kind of state-run mental health clinic. Uh, and that was some very basic ass therapy where I was mostly just checking in to make sure I didn't want to die. And like I was happily medicated and everything was feeling fine. And like that's it. That's all it was. Um, then when I went into doctoral school about a year and a half later, got married, had health insurance again, began doctoral school, and I had been told that doctoral school is a marriage killer. Those are the words that were used to describe a doctoral program, marriage killer. Um, so I had just gotten married literally in June. Um, Tomorrow is my 17th anniversary, which is awesome. Anyway, I started doctoral school right after I got married, so I didn't want to so I wanted to not get a divorce. That was my goal for therapy. Was like I know that it's going to be totally stressful, and I don't want to take the stress out on my husband. And I need to be in therapy while I'm in doctoral school. So I found a therapist, and I was so lucky. I was so lucky. I found a therapist, and in my first appointment, I was like, "Yeah, I have clinical depression. I need to be medicated." Um, uh, and she said, "So, have you ever considered that depression might have something to teach you?" And I burst out crying, like just like messy, gross. No, how could you say that? Depression hurts me. How could it be benefiting me when it causes me so much suffering? And I went back the next week and she's like, "Yeah, I thought I'd never see you again." And I was like, "Oh yeah, no, I don't quit things. I I decided to do this, and so I'm doing it." And honestly, that was some of the best therapy I've ever had. Was this particular therapist in this tiny little town in Connecticut, like tiny. Um, and she just happened to be just like living there. Her she had a private practice in her basement, like or it was like a walkout basement. So like her back room, and it was like she was amazing. She was great. She challenged me so much. She is the therapist from whom I learned about dream analysis and from whom I later extrapolated ways of analyzing art as if it were a dream, to look at the content of a story, uh, or whatever, as if every character and everything in it was a manifestation of the part of the main character. Um, that was some truly magnificent therapy. See, and a good therapist is hard to find. Yes. They just agree with me and give no feedback or insights. That sucks. Yeah, having a therapist who challenges you and yet challenges you in ways that are helpful, it's a fine line. Uh, I get to talk to my pet for free instead. Oh, thanks for the happy anniversary. 17 years. I'm very excited about being married. I am I got a good one. I'm a lucky person. Um Anyway, I stopped going to that truly excellent therapist when I, uh, got to the end of my doctoral program, um, and actually, as the doctoral program was getting very stressful, uh, my marriage did get a little more tense, and I asked this therapist, like, "Can I bring my husband in and do, like, a little couples thing?" And she's like, "Ordinarily, I'd say no, but you never talk about him." So, like, I feel like I can go in with a bit blank slate because I never talked about my husband because my husband was not a source of stress. Uh, he is, especially at the time, almost entirely just a source of, support and cooperation. Not that he's a perfect person, but, like, he was never the problem that I had to work on. So because I just never had talked about him, um, uh, uh, we actually went to a few sessions together with her. After she changed offices, actually, she got an office in an office building for her practice. It's like that's how long I was in therapy with her. It was like, I mean, it was like 5 years. And then I finished doctoral school. At the time, I also had a psychiatrist who, um, a psychiatrist who honestly just gave me whatever I asked for without hesitation. He was a great psychiatrist, man. Except that, like, the one thing that went wrong was that I went to him after I had gone to a conference. I'd gone to a conference. No, not a conference planning meeting. I was on the committee to plan this conference, and, like, I had had I mean, what I know now was a meltdown, an autistic meltdown, and, like, even getting ready to go in anticipation, I could feel, like, this is gonna be so hard, and, he diagnosed it as social anxiety. I know now that it's autism, not social anxiety, uh, but the result is the same, which is that he gave me anti-anxiety meds. He said, "Have you ever taken any anti-anxiety meds?" And I said, "Well, when I was 14, I had my tonsils taken out. They gave me Valium before I went into the, OR, and that worked great." So he gave me a prescription for Valium, and I have not had a psychiatric prescriber since who would give me Valium. They're all like, "No, that stuff is, I guess, too addictive or, like, kind of a blunt instrument." Anyway, he was the only guy who was like, "You said Valium, here's some Valium." Um, and that it worked good. Um, I have a different anti-anxiety med that I'm prescribed now, um, which also works great, but that prescriber was just like, "This is the thing you said has worked for you. This is the thing we will give you." This is great. Not like an insightful original kind of psychiatrist, but, like, really reliable. Anyway, then I finished my doctoral program, moved to Massachusetts, um, was doing fine, was doing great, and then Trump got elected, and and I had to go back into therapy, and I had trouble finding a therapist who was available and covered by my insurance. So I went to the first therapist I found, and she seemed fine. She seemed good. There were a few red flags. There were a few red flags. Um, and eventually, when I was diagnosed with autism, um, when I started talking to her about autism, she really didn't know anything about autism. So I decided I needed to go to a therapist who knew some stuff about autism, who could, like, talk to me about autism and and doing work around being autistic and unmasking. So I told her, logged into a therapy session. It was remote at that point. Logged into a therapy session and said, "So now that I've been diagnosed with autism, I think I'm gonna see a therapist who has training in that, who specializes in that." And so we had a session where I, was like, "Yeah, this is why I wanna go. This is the kind of thing I wanna talk to a specialist about." And at the end of that appointment, she was like, "So when should we schedule again?" And I was like, "No, no, no, that thing I was saying about seeing someone who knows a lot about autism, that's, that's now. I wanna do that next, so I'm not gonna schedule another appointment." Like, which, I mean, just goes to show you that I mean, communication and understanding and clarity, between autistic people and allistic people or non-autistic people, is a problem, is an issue. Like, I don't know if I didn't say it clearly enough or if I needed to explicitly say, "I'm leaving as a client, but, like, I mean, happily, I had no feelings of, like, I owe this person a personal goodbye. This is someone who and I know that a lot of people have feelings of, like, you know, emotional connection and responsibility and obligation to a therapist, but, like, you don't. This is a medical provider who is there to help you with a job, and you get to just leave if you want to. You get to just walk away if you want to. Um, yeah. So now I have a new therapist, and she knows a lot about autism, and is very supportive and good and helpful with talking about the main thing that like concerns me these days, which is mostly unmasking and kind of like getting comfortable with being autistic in the world and reconciling the thing then going to talk about related to Murderbot, which is unmasking and what the expectations are of what that's going to be like versus what actually happens. So moral of the story is if the therapist you go to doesn't feel like helpful, don't go to that therapist anymore. And yeah, you might have to go to a few to find one that's, you know, helpful in the right ways. Robyn, my current therapist is actual fucking best. She extended her license so she could still see me when I moved out of That's awesome. That's amazing. That is the actual fucking best. I'm so happy for you, Robyn. Christine, forget about the stream. Here now. Hi. Hi, Christine. How you doing? Um, Robyn, psychiatry is wild. Mine sees me for 15 minutes every 3 months. 100%. Like, do you even know me? No. I broke up with her when she dared to suggest that I find another therapist who is cheaper. Oh, hell no. Um, almost, not also. I say almost broke up with her when yeah. Okay, so let me tell you about the psychiatrist that I broke up with. Um, when I first moved to Massachusetts, again, I had trouble finding a prescriber because it's hard to find prescribers. And I found a psychiatric nurse practitioner. And the first time I went to her office, I was sitting outside in like the waiting area, and there was a white noise machine, but it wasn't on. And I could hear every word that the client she was with said. Um, and it was very uncomfortable. And when the other client left and I went, I'm like, just so you know, I could hear every word. Like, I know there's a white noise machine. I don't know if it's supposed to be on, but it wasn't. Like, red flag. She told me some other stories that were red flags. Like, she couldn't believe that her husband, who was a prison guard, got in trouble for leaving his gun in his car unsecured. That was a problem. And she was like, "Oh, it's not even fair." And I was like, red flag, red flag. So then when I got COVID and it was the summer of 2020 and I had long COVID and I was exhausted and I was having online appointments and okay, so just like a quick little brief content warning about you know, bodily safety. Mhm. Just turn the volume down for 30 seconds. It was during the Rodney King not Rodney King, God, George Floyd protests, dating myself. George Floyd protests, and she was complaining about the idea of defunding the police, so I was explaining what it means to defund the police. You know how cops, uh, are called to, like, domestic disputes and, like, every little thing, and they're overextended, and there's too much for them to do, and she's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "So, defund the police means pay a different kind of department of, like, social workers to go, like, take care of that stuff, where you don't need, like, a dude with a gun, you need someone who can help provide support and solve problems." Um, and she was like, "Huh." But before that, she was like, "Defund the police, I mean, um, what would you do if you were sexually assaulted?" She said. "Wouldn't you want the police to be there?" And I was like, "Hey, dude, I was sexually assaulted, which you know, and I did not go to the police, which you know, because the police treat victims of sexual assault badly. They are blamed for their own assault. They are made to pay for their own medical care, like investigative. You know what I'm saying? Okay, clear for the trigger warning. You can turn the volume back up now, if you went away. Um, yeah, so because after this, I was like, "That was not cool. That was not cool. Like, that was not okay. This was a terrible, bad, horrible, not okay, um, interaction." And so I found a new prescriber, and the new prescriber said, "Do you wanna talk to your old prescriber about why you left, or should I contact them?" And I was like, "You do it, please. I do not wanna have that conversation. I don't wanna have any more conversations with that provider, and, uh, also, if I can get anybody else to do it, that'd be great. I don't wanna have to, like, revisit any of that." And I feel sure that this former prescriber was well aware that she would never see me again. I feel like she must have known after that appointment. There was no way I was ever coming back. Christine, I spent over a year searching for an autism educated therapist in one of Germany's largest cities. Finally found someone. He does neurofeedback, which helps my headaches. Other than that, I mean, neurofeedback is extremely cool. Like, that's a pretty specialized thing. Other than that, I pay for a second therapist out of pocket, and she's amazing. I freaking adore her. Yeah, it when you gotta pay for your, it's expensive. Well, maybe in Germany the funding is different, but I freaking adore her. She's neurospicy herself and just gets stuff. She also does IFS with me, and it's so hard but helpful. Yeah, my current therapist is also big into IFS. Um, which Emily does in a very, like, elaborate way, and for me, just the basic fundamentals of parts is, like, plenty for me. That's Emily gets, like, whole narrative structures of parts of her personality, and I'm like, "I don't know, I feel like there's a knot of tension in me, and I should talk to it," like, just very bare bones basic. But that's, I mean, great. Yeah, yeah, Robyn, that it's, I know, it's a bad story. And it's, you know, I gave her no warning. I gave her no, I just was like, "And I'm gonna find somebody else." And I did, and I found somebody who specifically, so how I found somebody, specifically how I looked was I went to the Health at Every Size website to find someone who was trained in health at every size, especially because in the time between getting the former prescriber and the current prescriber, I had gone up 2 dress sizes, 2 pant sizes, 2 sizes, and it was becoming more important because I definitely needed somebody who wasn't gonna, like, tell me to lose weight in order to improve my mental health, because that's just factually inaccurate. Um, so it is hard to find a person. Um, but I did, I found someone through Health at Every Size, and it's the first time I've had a prescriber who is noticeably younger than me, like a decade younger than me, but I mean, I'm old now, I'm fully middle-aged, and she's a millennial, and no, she's great, but it's telehealth appointments, and she's in, like, sweatshirts and eating her lunch while she talks to me, and it's the best. It's very chill, it's very easy, it's awesome. So, I'm in a good place right now. Christine, I had a therapist who I saw for our first appointment who allegedly knew about autism, and she tried to deny my diagnosis within 15 minutes. Yeah, the therapist I was seeing while I was diagnosed with autism was also kind of like, "You're not autistic. You don't see objects as people, do you?" Like, she really had not been updated in her autism education since maybe the 90s, 'cause that's what I knew about autism back when I was in the '90s and I was taking education courses, and in our special education training, like, this was the image we were given of what autism is like, and my information was not updated since then because it didn't matter, like, I wasn't teaching autistic kids that I knew of, so I never had to the therapist who denies your diagnosis is not a helpful therapist. Later found out she had BPD as a potential diagnosis on my chart. That is a common misdiagnosis for autistic women. AFAB, autistic people are commonly misdiagnosed with BPD, um, or other, like, not just mood disorders, but, like, the cluster B, personality disorders. Those are yep, ASD, ADHD. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a common thing that people that AFAB, autistic and ADHD people, that's not uncommon. Um, okay, so that's my spiel on leaving mental health professional behind to get one that's better, and, like, yeah, it's totally possible you might have a nightmare story, and, like, you get to just walk away from that person. You have no obligation to keep giving that person your money, even if it's the insurance company's money. So there's a couple of things I wanna say about Murderbot this week. Murderbot, uh, okay, hold on, I'm gonna move this to the side so I can look at my list to make sure it's only 2 things. But can I remember the things? No, because I have the brain fog. I have the fog of brain in my brain. Okay, the first thing is, uh, unmasking. There's a moment about halfway through the episode where 2/3 the way, where Murderbot says Murderbot expected, that being out and having the humans know that it had hacked its governor module meant that he wouldn't have to answer stupid human questions. Um, Stupid human questions like, "How are you doing?" Which, uh, phatic communication feels stupid to some autistic people because communication is for the exchange of information, right? Just chatting or updating other people on your wellness feels, I mean, it is. It's phatic communication. It is without specific purpose, except the purpose is to, like, bond and connect. Um, and it just doesn't accomplish that for a lot of autistic people. It does not for me. It feels like, I mean, like, now that I know and I'm diagnosed with autism, and my husband and I went to specific, you know, neurodivergent couples counseling, um, specifically to, like, get clear with each other. I mean, we just had a person who could translate between autistic and allistic, to make sure that we weren't, like, crossing wires and not understanding each other, and so that my husband could understand that, like, in the process of unmasking, one of the things I would be doing that he said, then he was like, "Well, I'm afraid now that you have this diagnosis that you're gonna stop trying," and I was like, "We need to talk about that, because yes, I am gonna stop trying to be normal. I am gonna stop trying to conform under in all circumstances. Like, there's gonna be times when I'm gonna just go ahead and be, neurodivergent out loud." So we had that specific counseling, and one of the things that we talked about was, like, he likes to talk, like, sit outside and talk about what's happening in the trees and the birds that we can hear, and, like, that plane that's flying overhead, and, like, making observations, and none of it has any purpose. I was baffled by it and kind of irritated, like, "Why do you expect me to have these conversations? It doesn't accomplish anything." But I learned that it does accomplish something, that it accomplishes a feeling of bonding, and, oh, okay, so I can do those things, but, like, he has to understand that it's hard for me, and so therefore, we kind of weigh how much time I spend doing that. how much time does he need to feel like we've accomplished the bonding, and how little can I get away with because I find it so difficult and draining. Um, so, like, the expectations of, like, what's gonna happen when I unmask? Am I gonna have to continue? I thought I was not gonna have to have these kinds of conversations anymore, but, like, there's you still gotta t fit in to some degree and compromise, getting to go along with the normal folks. Denise, hello from Germany. Oh, thanks. Guten Tag, Denise. Ich studierte deutsche Fremdsprache im Schule. Das ist mein bester deutscher Sprechen. Es ist schlecht. Ich weiß, ich weiß. I did have to take a German reading knowledge exam in my doctoral school. You have to pass a German reading knowledge, but that was 12 years ago. So, uh, yeah, я ничего не помню. I know more Russian than I know German. Um, and I don't know much Russian. So anyway, hi. Guten Tag, or is it Guten Abend there now? Because it must be, because you're like, um, but hey, there's barely an accent. Pronunciation, typical for singers. Yeah, I took a semester of German pronunciation. I for like 9 weeks or however long a semester is, I specifically just studied, you know, how to pronounce German. So guten Abend, gute Nacht. Good night is like a dismissal though. Like goodbye is good night a dismissal. It's kind of like that for in English. So I kind of assumed that was true. Anyway, um anyway, so cool, Germany. My languages are just I have I'm very good at pronouncing languages. This is the thing I discovered through my um, graduate school, was that uh, foreign language diction was very easy for me. And it turns out that when I was diagnosed with autism, I also learned about more about synesthesia. Gute Nacht in a minute because we'll be going to bed here soon. Oh, schlafen Sie gut? I know it's schlafen. Yeah, schlafen Sie nope, I can't have a sleep well, have a good night. But anyway, I learned that like other people don't have as easy a time with pronouncing foreign languages, but also I have a kind of synesthesia where I can taste sounds, especially words. Um, and I think that helps because it gives me another way to like find my way into the sound of a language. Yeah. So anyway, so unmasking and the expectations you have with unmasking. Uh, Emily and I have already recorded the unmasking episode where it's for the most part a book report on Devin Price's Unmasking for Life, which I read and Emily read, Unmasking Autism. So we talk about like Devin Price's perspective on living as an autistic person and having to uh, uh, having to like kind of face the consequences of what it means to diverge from the typical. Gute Nacht is not dismissive. Yeah, I'm going to bed. Well, that's what I meant by dismissive. Like it's a dismissal like bye-bye. I'm not going to see you anymore tonight. I think you CN. I think you mentioned that autistic people sometimes feel like extraterrestrials for sure. 100%. 100%. This is a very common thing that autistic people describe of I feel like I don't belong here, like I came from another planet and landed, and all these other people seem to understand naturally how to interact with each other, and I am clearly not like them. I am missing something because I don't understand how they all just know. There seems to be all these unwritten, unspoken, implicit rules about how the world works. Uh, yeah, it's so common. It's uh so many. I mean, it's almost a stereotype about. There's a book by an autistic dude called like "Learning to Be Human," which I haven't read because it's about learning to mask, basically, learning to, like, get along in the world by meeting expectations. As I haven't read it, but that's, like, the vibe I get from the descriptions and the summaries that I've, read of it, like, I was like, "Hmm, that book doesn't seem like it's for me." Um, Whereas I think Devin Price has I'm not fully like 100%, yes, my experience is just like Devin Price's experience, and Emily is like Devin Price's experience seems like completely different from mine because she's hyper aware of her internal state, and Devin Price talks a lot about like, alexithymia and the lack of perceptiveness about your own inner, experience. Learning to unmask is so hard. When you've been trained to mask through negative social interactions and didn't have a concept for the behavior for so long. I thought I was so fake. Yep. Yep. Still only have some control over masking. I can't really. Yeah. I mean, so I was diagnosed like 4 years ago now. And, um, like you take a test as part of the diagnostic process, you take a test about masking. Um, and my the clinician who diagnosed me said I had the highest masking score she had ever seen and was particularly worried about the consequences of my health, which makes so much sense why I ended up in the hospital with stress induced illness during my doctoral program, which required so much masking from me that I was consciously aware that the stress I was experiencing was because I was having to like conform to unspoken expectations that I thought were mostly due to the fact that I was, an AFAB conductor when no AFAB conductors to this day have ever completed that doctoral program. 0 at that school. Other schools, yes, lots of AFAB people have doctorates in conducting, but at that school, no. And like just the general vibe of sexism around conductors, and also a lot of like real condescending um jerks on the faculty. And the fact that I had expertise that they didn't believe that I had expertise in, and I had to like stroke their egos and maintain a false sense of humility and squash down my own artistry in order to get a piece of paper from them. These I had to do so much squashing of myself. I didn't realize um the the medical consequences of doing that. The medical consequences of doing that were so severe that I ended up learning so much about it that Emily and I wrote a book about it, right? I took the massing test. Yeah, after we talked about it. It wasn't part of your diagnostic process in Germany, but psychiatry is but really because German psychiatry is I mean, that's where psychiatry was invented. It was Germany. Well, Germany, Austria, the you know, German speaking area. Twofold stressor because you're performing gender and neurotypical behavior. Yeah, it sure was. That's that is in fact, I think now why it was so stressful is not only was I performing gender, like, because I am an AFAB non-binary person who didn't understand that, like, what non-binary was at the time. And the thing about Murderbot is that Murderbot has the same issue of being non-binary and I mean, neurodivergent is a very understated way to put it of like, you know, its nervous system is literally built differently. It's built out of organic parts and of, computer components. Um, so that's one of the reasons I find Murderbot so relatable. And in the show, they have Lee Beebe as a character who like sexually objectifies Murderbot, which like, you can feel the, like, "Oh god, this is terrible. This is wrong." And because I'm consciously aware now that this is an experience I've had, yeah, I can totally see being not only experiencing sexism as a woman of, like, they see me as a woman, so the thing I'm experiencing is sexism. That was I didn't understand that I was experiencing sexism because I didn't know deep down that I was a woman, right? Like, because I never identified. I never felt like a woman. I always felt like gender had nothing to do with me. Um, so I didn't recognize that other people see me as a woman, so they're treating me like a woman, and that's sexism. I thought, how could sexism apply to me? Because nothing about womanhood applies to me. I didn't understand. So the mystery of that and the challenge of it, and then the other mystery and challenge of having undiagnosed autism. Yeah, like no wonder I ended up in the hospital. Like no wonder that stressed me out. It was a mess. And then also because I've always been real confident. Maybe, arrogant, a little bit, and I just had to completely turn off and, like, just at the spout, just, like, stop the water hose where the water is confidence. I had to just, like, "Nope," and so the water backed up and, like, destroyed some organs. See, and it's impressive you were able to finish the degree with all of your extra complications, and you're able to. I mean, okay, so one of the reasons I was able to finish was because I have Emily Nagoski, PhD, wellness educator, as my twin sister, right? Who literally the first time I was hospitalized, drove to the hospital and, like, had a book recommendations of, like, "This is what you need to do," of, like, "Here's how you manage stress, and stress is a thing that happens in your body." And if I hadn't had her, if I hadn't had that, like, immediate, like, um, evidence-based information and support, uh, I I I would have finished, um, because I don't quit things because 'cause I'm autistic. My my therapist that I had who was kinda like, "You're not autistic," like, the one that I had after Trump was elected the first time, um, said to me, "Well, you could have quit." And I was like, No, I couldn't have quit. I would have kept going until it fucking killed me because I've been planning this path since I was in the 8th grade. This has been my path for 30 years. I'm going to walk this path. I'm going to finish this path and I'm going to achieve this goal because that's what I do. I finish things. And also my academic advisor said to me in my first year, commuters don't finish. I was commuting 65 miles each way from my house to school, and, he said, "Commuters don't finish." And I was like, "Challenge accepted. I'm gonna finish no matter what." Um, it was never a choice. It was never like, "Well, I could just quit. This doesn't seem to be good for me. I could just get" Nope! That was not going to happen. Yeah, Emily is the best sister. I mean, she's not perfect, but, like, I'm super lucked out, like, we sh able to, you know, help each other a lot, like, in complimentary ways. I hate to be pretend less smart than I am to appease people who I know are less smart than me. Yes, but when that person has control over whether or not you get this piece of paper that says you're qualified to do the job you want, like, you do whatever it takes. Unless you're more flexible and open-minded and able to be like, "Is there another way I could achieve this goal where I don't have to, like, deny my own identity?" I didn't know anything about the word identity at the time, so no. Do they get pissed off and try to sabotage you when they realize how smart you are? Oh, Christine, I resemble that statement. I'm not autistic, gifted adult. But that's a huge part of giftedness that you learn early. Oh, yeah. Do they get sabotage? Well, yeah, 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 yeah. Yes, they do. That is what they do. Um, so I want to talk about one more thing about Murderbot when it comes to this same kind of thing. Which is so the last thing that happens is that all of the crew, the Prezox team, is trying to talk to Murderbot about, like, "Hey, you seem really threatening and scary. Are you on our side? Can we trust you? Like, what are your feelings? We wanna understand. We can talk about this." And, first of all, they have a thing that they show, like, in the, like, the cold open, they show that team having, like, dinner before the mission starts, and they're playing this game where they're like, "We can talk about this." You talk about bitter things and sweet things, and, and you just, like you just be really honest and open about things that are hard and things that you're grateful for, and everybody says, "We can talk about this." It's like a chant that "We can talk about this. We can talk about this." And they do that, and Murderbot says, "Why are they saying that? Why do they keep saying we can talk about this?" Um, and in terms of the, like, feeling like an alien who just landed and not understanding what all, uh, d people do and say, the idea that the Prezox team has this thing that's like a ritual for them, "We can talk about this," um, they didn't explain that to Murderbot. They left it in the dark and just, like, imposed their tradition on it without any explanation, without any clarification, without just assuming that it was a thing that everybody would just understand. Nope. Even though they know that Garathan I mean, even so Garathan is the one who's not from there. He had to, like, learn all this, stuff himself. Um, but, like, even Garathan, like, kinda got it, right? But Murderbot just does not get it. Like, nobody explained, and when nobody explains what the expectations are, it's impossible to meet the expectations. It's so necessary to have some explicit explanation what is expected here, especially when it's about feelings and communication. Um, so then they're in the middle of this baffling conversation about feelings when Murderbot says, I hear something in the perimeter, and they kind of dismiss that because they think that Murderbot's just trying to, like, escape the conversation about feelings, but it's really like there's a thing coming that's dangerous. And this is a very well done scene, I think, because Baradwaj, who is the member of the team who was almost eaten by, like, this monster on the planet, she is like, "Okay, we're gonna go. We're gonna," and she's leading the way, like, as soon as Murderbot's like, because back in the very first episode, Murderbot's like, "Hey, Dr. Baradwaj, Dr. Arata, something is coming. You need to, like, get out of there." And they ignored and dismissed it. Uh, so now that it's happening again, Baradwaj is like, "Oh yeah, no. The last time this happened, I got, literally I was in the mouth of the monster. So, like, now let's get back on the," but everybody else, they cannot hear, cannot heed, cannot understand the warning they're being given because their feelings are in the way. And I'm like, this feels so real that, like, people don't listen because their ears are full of their feelings. Um, and that feels very realistic. And it feels like the kind of Cassandra syndrome. Cassandra is a prophetess who could, like, see the future and wanted to warn people, but was, like, doomed to be ignored and to see the catastrophe that she had foreseen, to see it actually unfold even though she had knowledge of it, and she tried to warn people and prevent it, but nope, nobody listens. Um, and I think that that is also, um maybe it's not autism, maybe it's just pessimism, that this understanding of, like, inevitable bad things coming, people think either you're absorbed in your own fear or, uh, whatever, but they just don't wanna listen listen because they feel like, "Oh, no, it can't be that bad." I remember back in 2019, like, when Trump lost the election, um, I was like, "Hey," this is when I this is the very end of me being on Facebook. Um, when Trump lost the election, I was like, "Hey guys, like, Have you noticed that Trump has been preparing for an insurrection? Have you noticed that the past several months he's been, like, asking for people to come violently overthrow the government? Have you noticed that this has been happening? And everybody's like, "You're really so negative and so, you know, pessimistic. Like, that couldn't happen here." And then January 6th happened, and I was like, I need to get off social media because it drives me crazy." This feeling of, like, not being heard because people are up in their feelings instead of, like, objectively observing reality, and I thought that was a very relatable and well done moment in the show that felt very Murderbot. None of this stuff that happens in this episode happens in the show. Sorry, happens in the books. It's right now everything that's happening because right now, like, they've gotten to the point where, like, there's a quick wrap up and the book ends. They're kind of extending the story and drawing out the denouement. Um, it feels like padding because literally nothing happens in this episode that contributes to the story unless I'm gonna get to the end and be like, "Oh, that's why they needed to do this episode." But watching it sort of felt like, well, that nothing that happened in this episode mattered because 'cause they're just going back anyway. Anyway, um, but inside of that kind of pointlessness in terms of story structure, that feels like, there were some, like, really relatable and honest, moments of, "Oh, yeah. Yeah. Murderbot's unmasking, and, this is what that feels like, and this is how people react." Uh, I also really like that they gave Arata something to do finally. Arata's in this version of the story is a biologist, and so there's these 2 monsters that they think are attacking them, and, Arata finally gets to do something instead of just being, like, the sort of nice person. She finally gets to be, like, excited about something, and it was nice to see, that character get to do something. Christine, they take full advantage of the fact that they are above me in a corporate structure, have me do their work. Oh, ouch, Christine. And oh, it's maddening. Fragile egos and competition destroy progress so much of the time. Yes. Um, hierarchy specifically. Um, autistic people have a really hard time with hierarchy. When I had my diagnosis, my diagnostic appointment, which is part of the diagnostic process, um, with the clinician, started with her being like, "Hi, how you doing? Hi," like, just real like, turning on the camera and being like, "What's up?" And I was like, "Hey, what's up? Here for my thing." And, 10 minutes later, she's like, "So you're autistic?" Uh, and one of the ways that I know that is because most people respond to medical professionals with a kind of, respectful, uh, deference, and you didn't do that. And I was like, I mean, you came on really casual, so I just matched your energy." And she's like, "Yeah, most people don't do that. Most people feel a sense of hierarchy." And struggle. I struggle desperately with acknowledging that someone might have a position over me, and I have been fired from jobs for this. Like, I mean, I'll be like, another teacher or even the department chair is a colleague and we work together, but like the whole having to like respect their authority, I suck at that. I hate it. And I'm like, the world would be so much better if we didn't have hierarchy with people who have power over other people. What if we all just work together? There's got to be an alternative to this like very strict hierarchical. And I feel like the only reason we do it is because it makes people feel good to have power. And like, if the only reason we're doing it is to like stroke or pad people's egos, that's not a good enough reason to do it. So like when I was in a meeting with a boss, um, and was chewed out for, apparently my supervisor had come into my rehearsal to tell me to, like, step outside to have a conversation with her, um, I had never met this supervisor before, and I was literally in the middle of rehearsal with a children's chorus, and, it's a room full of children. I have to stay in that room to supervise the children, right? I can't just walk out of the room. So I was like, "No, no, I'm not doing that." And I just refused to do it. Um, and I was fired from that job, because I had not recognized the the bossness of this apparent boss, and I was not connected enough to the sense of the structure of the school and stuff. So I was fired from that job because I'm autistic. I mean, like, it's not that I was bad at that job. I did a great job with the if my job was to conduct those singers and make them sound good and give them a fun experience where they knew that, like, "Oh, we get to sing this blah, blah, blah," and it's the I was good at that part. But, like, all the other part that nobody told me, here are the other things. Besides the work that we've hired you to do, we also expect you to bond with the other faculty or whatever, I don't even know. Um, yeah, I got fired from that job, and it was because hierarchy is bullshit. And yeah, as we talk about, and we'll talk about in the next episode, talking about, unmasking for life, yeah, this is one of the reasons why autistic people tend to be, poor more often than non-autistic people, because working within a formal corporate structure is just harder for us. Because like, we're just like, "Hierarchy? What the hell is hierarchy?" The padding episode is so they can save money on one episode and spend it on the season finale. I mean, like, fingers crossed that the season finale is magnificent. In the book, the finale is they go to, they go to the big station, free commerce, and Murderbot's unconscious for all of it. Murderbot, like, wakes up, and the Prezox team has adopted him. It has adopted it, and then he runs away. Spoiler alert. It's been in the book for 10 years, so, like, if you haven't read it yet, it's not my job. Um, yeah, so, like, the show could have ended in this last episode and covered everything that was in the book. Um, so I don't know how they would, like, spend it on the finale, but, like, fingers crossed something amazing happens. I That would make me very happy. Christine, I learned hierarchy and all that crap because Austrian society is very, very socially hierarchical. Yup, yup. This helped with work, but I agree it's total bullshit. Got in trouble because I trusted. Yeah, yeah. When people told me they didn't care about the hierarchy and then got mad at me for speaking my mind. Yeah. And then there's going to be more because it's not an end of a sentence and I read it too soon. Sorry. Yeah. People have feelings about hierarchy. I also got scolded even at my academic job when we had a new department chair and I mentioned a thing in passing and she was like, "Joe, just so you know," like, she was way supportive about it and very like, "Here are some instructions I'd like to give you about what I expect in terms of like how we function as a department." And I was like, "Fair enough. Great. You know, thanks for letting me know." And I recognize that I didn't follow like a rule. Um, I also, uh, do not communicate well when it comes to, like, updating people who are in charge of me about my status. When I was hospitalized for the first time in doctoral school, I did not tell anybody because I it was during winter break, and we went back to class the next week, and I a week after no, it was the second time. Nope, it was the first time. Um I didn't tell anybody. So the second and then was like when I was like, "Oh, well, here's the reasons that I'm not feeling well. I was hospitalized." They were like, "You need to tell us this stuff." And I was like, "Oh, I need to tell you that stuff." Um, and then the second time I was hospitalized and I had surgery, um, I emailed from the hospital. So I learned from last time that I need to tell you that I'm having surgery, and I don't think it'll impact most of my responsibilities, but, just so you know, this is a thing that happened. It's a thing you gotta do. Okay. So those were all the things I wanted to talk about, the, like, expectations of unmasking, changing therapists, and, like, the feeling of Cassandra syndrome. Yeah, and I always gave my employer ideas for positive changes, and they were resentful at first, but finally let me implement my ideas when they realized they would be effective. Yeah, we have a story like that in Burnout, of, like, a real story that's, like, a composite characters experience where, like, an employee is like, "So, here's all this big pile of research that says that, rest and taking breaks and having a flexible schedule all lead to greater productivity." And the management's like, "Nope, nope, 9 to 5 in the office, that's what we wanna do." And, like, all evidence says that you'll get better work out of your employees if you implement these, this flexibility, this, uh expectation that people will have plenty of rest and take advantage of opportunities to get all the sleep they need. Um, you know, people are resistant. They're full of their feelings and full of um, tradition, and they ignore evidence because it doesn't feel familiar. That like, uh-oh, I have to change in order to conform to that new data. Well, yeah, it's super frustrating. So that's all the stuff. So I'll be back next week and you'll have heard the potentially um uh you likely help my workplace get a 4-day work week with 3 days as work from. That's amazing. That is ideal. I'm so glad that they actually implemented change. And, like, okay, one more thing. In the Middle Ages, the Black Death killed up to 90% of the population, when 99% of the population were poor people, were people, just regular people who didn't own castles, or, like, it was just the workers, right? Mostly, vast majority, farmers, people who worked the fields and took care of the animals. Um, so when the Black Death killed 90% of the population, there was a worker shortage. And as a result, working conditions got a lot better because there weren't people left to do all this labor. And so, if you wanted to get somebody to come work your land, you started paying them better. You started asking them to give less of their harvest to you. You provided them better food. You allowed them to keep more of what they reaped. Um, uh, but this pandemic, the COVID pandemic, instead of like having this experience of having to like completely overhaul how work happens, and then being like, "Oh, this could be better for all of us." Instead of that, corporations clamped down immediately and grabbed back as much as possible, as soon as possible. Get back into the office. You gotta be 9 to 5. You gotta be on call all the time. So instead of being like, a rising tide lifts all boats, um, we got the worst of all possible worlds. Now, not only are we expected to be in the office and like working under close supervision by the corporate overlords, but we are also expected to be working at home and on call 24 hours a day. And it's going to take some effort to try to like not let that be the direction that the results of the pandemic go. We're gonna have to It's gonna take some effort to be like, "No, no, we've all seen the promised land. We experienced it. We work from home. We had flexibility, and we demand that we found it, we had it. We discovered that it works, that we can get stuff done, that the company can keep running, you can keep earning profits while we are able to have greater access to the flexibility and freedom that lets us care for ourselves." So, like, we want that, and corporations are, like, trying to snatch it back, but, like, Middle Ages, permanent change happened for the better for the working people, and This is an opportunity where we could have that same experience. That was unrelated to anything I planned to talk about today, but since we were in the neighborhood of that subject, that's a thing that I feel like. Okay, for real this time, I'm gonna go. It's been nice to be a person in the world with y'all, and I'll see you next week. Bye. Hold on. Where's my button? End stream. Okay, bye, 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 bye.